Welcome to the Sacred Healing Podcast, where the old is new, the ancient is innovative, and the forgotten is remembered. We believe that sacred healing is your birthright. Join us on each episode as we uniquely, authentically, and mystically dive into the bold and vulnerable life of many magical humans. From breath, spirituality, shadow work, and all things in the esoteric realm of healing, we don't leave any stone unturned on this bold journey of growth as we start to explore the remembrance of what it means to be human. So take a deep breath in and a deep breath out, and let's get sacred.
Hello, sacred beings. Today I have the distinct honor and pleasure of talking to Sakina. She is an integrative somatic trauma therapist and somatic breathwork practitioner based out of Central Florida. She brings people to a space of clarity and connection within themselves through embodiment practices so that they can step into the world from a place of truth instead of a place of wounding. And she truly believes that if you are unaware of what your breath and body can do for you, you're not even truly alive yet. And breathwork and somatic modalities are really near and dear to my heart. And so I really enjoyed this conversation. And Sakina really invites you to deepen your presence and your mind-body awareness to feel the full spectrum of the human experience. And her extensive research and studies have landed her into a space of deep understanding of the mind-body connection while rapidly growing a community of clients that are transforming and living out their fullest potential, making her a powerhouse of trauma-informed nervous system regulation and conscious community building. And she's known for her group sessions that provide a safe container for people to express themselves and to feel fully and to process their experiences with supported integration. She's also available for one-on-one sessions and small group sessions, and she really embodies bringing forth your desires from a space of clarity and connection to yourself. And she's just an amazing human being. So as a fellow somatic breathwork practitioner, I am so excited to talk with Sakina today and hear about her life story, her background, and what brought her to this practice. And we get into some really deep, juicy conversations. So please enjoy this episode with Sakina. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Sacred Healing Podcast. I am here with the beautiful Sakina, and we met about 2 years ago, and then started kind of going off and weaving our own breathwork journeys. And she is gracing us with her presence today. She has a really magical vibrational gift of expression and sharing her own talents with the world in the form of being the founder of Enter the Inner Temple and an integrative somatic trauma therapist. So big mouthful there. But she's trauma informed, working with the nervous system, working with regulating self and body, as well as the connection to mind. And she's just been an inspiration for me. And so I'm really excited to chat with her today because I know we're going to get into the crunchy and the deep topics that you guys are all interested in. So Sakina, welcome to the show. I'll let you introduce yourself really quickly before we get into everything.
No, thank you so much. And thank you for you. Thanks for having me. So, like you said, my name is Sakina, founder of Enter the Inner Temple, integrative somatic trauma therapist, and a somatic breathwork practitioner, which is our weaving link. And I just believe in really bringing people to a space of clarity and connection within themselves, really so that they can step back into the community from a place of truth instead of their wounds. And I really feel like a lot of the way that we navigate the world, there's no denying the stress and pressures of life and existence and the human experience. So finding those tools that keep us in harmony, that allow us to navigate the ebbs and flows of life with grace, that really is just what lights me up. From, a lot of us, we don't really pick these paths, the paths choose us. And I really feel like I've been forged in the fire of life to bring these tools forth. So yeah, just really excited to be here and to talk about it. And I love to talk about it.
I'm so grateful you're here. And kind of, this is like a cut to, this is what you're doing now, but kind of going back in time a little bit, what was the catalyst for you to want to understand your own self? And what was the catalyst for you to kind of get on this journey of healing?
Yeah. So I have the background of a caregiver. I was a caregiver for my mother for 15 years. She was diagnosed when I was quite young with an aggressive cancer, and that shifted my life's path to really stepping into a role of a lot of things that I wasn't ready for. And as we know, trauma can sometimes mean too much too fast or too little for too long. And I like to think of that culmination of experiences as like the catalyst of what has led me into the path of service. However, I would say, it was, I feel like my journey so far has just been like a never ending cycle of the deaths and the rebirths, and it's catalyst after catalyst. So whether we talk about the caregiving experience or my own health collapsing a year after my mother passed away, I would say, life in itself and the bigger transformative moments of coming so close to death and then having to walk myself back over and over and over again, that would be what I would define as my like straight shot journey to breathwork and what I'm doing right now. And that came from the caregiving, running the 15-year business, trekking through life's journeys, and then my own health collapsing and being so bedridden and on my back. And the only thing I was really able to do was breathe. So, yeah, package deal.
Wow. And so kind of encompassing all of those lessons, and I would really love to get into your 15-year business journey as well. But before we go there, what were some of the like pearls that you took away from your experience, not only caregiving for your mom, but going through your own like darkness of your own health journey? What were some of the things that came up for you? Even if, they're quite shadowy, I would just be interested to see like, what are those things that you kind of took from that experience?
Yeah. I would say the one thing that comes up first is truly understanding and knowing that our mind and body connection is absolutely vital. Understanding that our emotions absolutely affect our physical state. And just finding that unshakable truth within yourself, that center of centers. That's something that really stuck to me from our Fit for Service time together, was finding that center of centers and really finding your truth in your essence and holding on to that like the golden thread of your expression and your unique code of existence here. And that, I would say those two things, like really, really coming to harmony with the mind body experience, understanding that this human experience is full spectrum. So really embracing all sides, those shadowy, crunchy, dark, strange, parts of life, and experiencing that energetic dance of those moments and being able to really extract and bask in the light and the softness and the joy and the warmth of what's on the other side. Yeah, play and polarity.
Play and polarity. And I love how you called it a dance too, because often that is what life is, right? We're dancing in between different energies, and sometimes it could be an energy of grief. Sometimes it can be love. Sometimes it's sadness or madness or joy. And we don't always get to choose. Sometimes we do, but sometimes life just hits us in the face. So it is quite a dance. You've also kind of grown up as a really talented metalsmith. And it's one of the things that I found out about you recently. And I was like, damn, that is badass. How did you start in that industry, and how did you start making jewelry? I would love to talk about your business, because you and I were chatting earlier, and you're actually almost at your 15-year mark of that business. So full congratulations. And also, that's a really long time to be doing something. So how did you get into that?
Yeah.
And stay with it too, because it must be something you really love.
So I started working with metal a long time ago, and I started as a sculptor. So I was a sculptor and a painter, and I was just making a lot of sculptural pieces. And then one day I was asked to make something that was wearable, and I did. And I taught myself how to like work with metal for the first time in my parents' garage. I don't recommend, but that was almost 15 years ago, and I had always been in love with minerals and crystals and all of that. I grew up around a lot of like utilizing minerals and ritual practices and stuff. So those worlds kind of combined very organically. And honestly, the second I started working with metal, it was like this strange, deep remembrance, and I haven't stopped since. I just love it. It also was a massive tool for me to really alchemize a lot of my experiences. So being the caregiver and, dropping my mother off to chemo and then working a full-time job and helping raise siblings, sometimes showing up in a shop and just hammering things out and setting things on fire is quite therapeutic. So that really is how it started. And then I realized that the more that I expressed myself, since I was quite a young one, really for as long as I can remember, and even through schooling, I was extremely effective in my expression and my communication through visual arts and visual practices and making things with my hands and tangible, visceral experiences. However, when it came to speech and speaking, like I was unable. I was diagnosed with selective mutism and a lot of things that were really based and rooted in fear, things that I'm actually still like unraveling and unfurling. But being able to express myself through visual things or tangible things has always been a strong suit, and jewelry has been my way of really like transmuting that love and that expression and things that I feel through something that's wearable, like something that people can take with them and hold on to and pass along. And yeah.
And what is the name of what's the name of your jewelry company, just for those who are listening?
Yeah, so my company is named Nightbreed Creations because it started as all of my creative outpourings, and coming up on my 15th year, Nightbreed Creations is going to do like a From the Vault. So this is also another like full circle. I'm expressing myself in all ways again, bringing back like sculpture, jewelry, painting, photography, all the things. So yeah.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Can't wait to continue to follow that journey. And you mentioned that there was some sort of like a remembrance with working with metal. I would love to double click on that. Do you feel like you, like in a past life worked with metal? Like, what did that feel like in your body?
Yeah. So I say that when I drop into that like flow state when I'm in the shop, it's a very elemental experience working with metal. Like it's a lot of, you're hammering, you're using force. There's a lot of sweat, and I say that's the water. And then there's the fire, literally. There's the earth that you're working with, like the metal and you.
Hello, sacred humans. Quickly, I want to share with you something I've added into my daily rituals that has me buzzing, and that is Rise Mushroom Coffee. Rise entered my life through my Instagram algorithm that obviously knows what products I like, and I gave it a try, and just wow, it has amazingly delicious flavor. Not only this, they also have a mushroom matcha powder. mind blown. And they're filled with superfoods and super mushrooms. What I like about Rise is that they use 100% organic ingredients, and their mushroom farms are located in California. If you've always wanted to try mushroom coffee but haven't yet pulled the trigger, this is your moment. And there is zero risk because they have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're interested in the deliciousness of Rise mushroom elixirs, head to the show notes and you will find a link for 20% off your first order, or simply use the discount code Jessica, all caps, at checkout. That's JESSICA, all caps, at checkout. And now let's get back to our amazing episode of the Sacred Healing Podcast.
Yeah, so as far as remembrance goes with working with metal, a lot of it really came through the process of obviously working with the metal and really feeling like that elemental experience. And it is one of those things that just is like beyond words. You know, a lot of the times when I was working with these materials, I didn't need to necessarily like learn the chemistry behind a lot of the processes. It was almost something that would just happen, you know, and I followed that, and I would follow these intuitive threads of, you know, I'm laying down in bed and all I can think about is like the perfect melting temperature of a metal and what that color looks like, and you know, what crystals want to be with what metals. And there's certain things that I quite honestly, you know, if I could explain them, I'm not sure that I would even want to, just because working with metal has been a thread of awe for me. You know, I love the way that I feel, and I love that question mark experience of like, yeah, I guess I'm supposed to do this because it feels so right. It feels so good. It feels so aligned. And funny quick story is when I did take a quick trip out to India to like trace down my heritage, they followed my last name, Manji, and I ended up in a little hut in Kutch in India. And the first person that I met was a man with the same last name, and he was making bells out of metal. So somewhere in my lineage, we were always working with metal, and we were always these elemental handicraft humans, you know, and that really lights me up. So I would say, you know, following that essence and that feeling actually led me to like some sort of tangible truth. But I would say, yeah, in some way, I feel like we all have that remembrance of like creating and working with our hands and these beautiful little tools that carry us through so much and can do so much. I just feel like I just activate that remembrance every now and then, you know, through creation. We're all creative.
I love that you are expressing your art in that way. And also, it's so cool that you got a chance to go to India to try and track down some of the heritage. Was that a trip like solely based on tracking down lineage, or was there anything else that you were doing in India?
Yeah, it started off as that, as like my family, when I would question my family as to like, where are we from? Like, what are we doing? Because I have an Arabic last name. I speak technically a dead language. We're from a very, very small part of India. There was just a lot of questions that I had about us. And I realized that within my family, I was the only like deeply curious one. Just nobody really wanted to talk about it. And yeah, I had that pull after college to just like go see where I was from, what was going on, you know. And I ended up out there, and I ended up studying dance, and then I studied metal, and I learned how to cut stones out there, like lapidary work and all of that. So it was a mix of experiences, but another coming home, another coming home to the self for sure.
That's really cool. And how amazing to be able to go on that journey and just learn more about your lineage. That's amazing. So getting out of metal work and into breath. However, you mentioned before we jumped on that there was kind of a circle that got a little bit more completed when you started to get into breath work. How would you describe that for the listeners of like that completed circle?
Yeah. So I like what we were talking about before. When it comes to the metal work, a lot of that was the fire, the water, the earth. And when I really started utilizing breath work in my everyday practice and my own well-being and literally breathing myself back to life after my own health complications, I just had so many moments where I was like, oh, this feels so good. I feel so aligned. And it was almost like that completion of air weaved itself into that elemental, wheel. And we had the air, the water, the fire, the earth, my earth. And I had that full circle moment of like, look at us, like, look at all of the inner alchemy that we experience when we're tapping in, tuning in, and getting to know ourselves. Like all of those elements are so alive. And from that aliveness comes our true expression. Like what a beautiful experience. So yeah, that's kind of what I was touching on, was like breath work really brought in and completed that elemental like wheel or circle for me. And it felt very full circle. It felt very complete and very whole.
When was the first time you got introduced to breath work, and what was that experience like for you? Because we may have a similar story here, but like the first time I did breath work, it ignited something in me that like can never be put out.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what that first experience was like for you.
Yeah. So my very first experience that I can recall was actually when I was in the Himalayas in India, because it was so cold. And because it was so cold, I was staying at a monastery, and the monk there was actually practicing like breath of fire, similar something to like breath of fire. And he taught me that. He's like, it'll keep you warm. And that was like my first experience. But during that, I felt something and I was like, oh, what's going on? And then I remember my whole trek home, which was up a mountain in negative 22 degrees of like snow and hail. I had this calm, clear, like, oh, I've got this. I'll make it home safely. Everything's going to be good. And I felt really alive and really able to breathe. So that was like my first actual experience. But I would say my first transformative one was in India, and I was sitting there, and at the time my mother was possibly on her way out. She was rushed into a surgery, and I was stuck in the Himalayas and couldn't find a flight out. And I remembered that little like center of center feelings. And I was in my hostel and I did it, and I just kept doing it. And I had a full experience of like full washover. It felt so visceral. It felt like I was bathing in warm water, and I could see her face clearly. And there was a lot of just emotion and visuals and clear messages, just clear truth that came through. And nothing's ever been the same since.
Wow. So you guided yourself through
Yeah.
one of your first breathwork experiences.
Yeah, and it was very intuitive, to be honest. Like I remember, just because I was in such shambles, it was just I was breathing and then I was moving and I was rolling around on the rug, and whatever my body needed to do. It was actually my first time ever even giving myself the permission to do it, but it took me being in that like full desecration and just grief and sadness to like go there. And then when I came back, I was like, oh, like maybe I should let myself roll around a little bit more, and maybe I should give myself a little bit more of that permission, and to be in that really dysregulated state of not being able to fly home to my mother and be the caregiver and be that role that I was supposed to be. And, so much guilt, so much overwhelming emotion, to be able to like tap in and just like, zoop, and make clear decisions and do what I needed to do in that moment. Like that was priceless. That was everything to me. And I followed that moment, to this day. I still recall that moment of like, it's okay to feel it all.
Mm. And how often, in our society, do we not give ourselves permission to just move our body in the way that it wants to move, or to use our voice in the way that it wants to be expressed? And so we tend to suppress. And as you and I both know as practitioners, when you have so much suppression, it can just start to compile and compound. And then you have kind of a breakdown, or it comes out in the form of dis-ease or stress, anxiety, trauma, whatever way it expresses out. But there's a way that we can harness the gift of our breath to really help ourselves heal. And so that's such a really powerful story. It's not what I was expecting you were going to say. And it is really beautiful because you were going through this like deep, dark, shadowy, like grief process, but also you mentioned the shame and the guilt of like not being able to be there for your mom. And I applaud that your body knew what to do in that moment because you got to that place. So that was the first time you experienced breath work. When did you know that you wanted to basically facilitate and inform people about their nervous systems and be this integrative somatic trauma therapist? Because that's way deeper than just a breathwork session, right? That takes a lot. So how did you decide that this is what you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah, so I definitely did not think that this is where I would be, to be fully honest. I can't say I had like the intention of being in this realm of work, which makes me laugh now. Like I always say, spirit laughs at our plans, And I really thought that I was going to be pursuing my metal work and being a creative, but I realized, especially with, my mother's experience, and after she passed, I went straight into becoming into the grief and loss world, and I became a death doula, and I was working with people through transition. And in that, it was a lot of like leaning into, it was heavy on ritual, but also really heavy on breath. And I just realized, the more that I was in that space, the more that I was working on myself, the more that my health was collapsing on me, and I had to find my way back to me, I had to pull myself out. The more I walked that walk, the more I really was actually just naturally embodying it and talking the talk. And, people were, I visited like over 30 doctors. I got a couple of wrong diagnoses. I had family even questioning, what was going on, because it was a lot of invisible illness. So people would look at me and they're like, but what's wrong? And I was literally immobilized. I couldn't even get up out of my bed some days. So there were times where I felt myself really breathe myself back in. And that's when I realized, oh, we do decide. Like we decide, and every breath actually is opportunity. I am walking proof of it. I always say I'm my own best testimonial, because a couple of years ago, I was being given, a terminal diagnosis. So, and it was just one of those things where all of me, every cell in my body, every time I sat down with my breath, every cell in my body activated and said, no, that's not your truth. That's not it. That's not it. And and that became a frustration of like, what do I know? What is going on? What do you mean I know? Like, what does this mean? But the more I just deeply listened, and the more I surrendered and trusted, the more I literally did come back to life. And then everybody around me started asking, like, what are you doing? And I would be like, breath work, you should try it. You know how it is when you first like realize how powerful and potent this tool is, And with breath work, it was one of those things where I'd wake up every day and almost laugh, like, oh, it's that simple. We just have to breathe, and slowly, we come back to ourselves. A lot of people were just, I'd go in for a coffee and then they'd like yank me and be like, 5 minutes, just 5 minutes with the breath. Like, let's do it. And I realized that maybe it was just time to become a practitioner and really do this responsibly, come at it responsibly. I had a lot of background in grief and loss and death and transition, and Kundalini styles of breath work and different styles of breath work that I had dabbled into, but I didn't really take it into consideration as something that I offer my community until I found the right places that aligned for me, which were somatic breathwork, fit for service, communities that really focus on bringing these modalities to our people and to our beloveds, but in a really responsible and trauma-informed way. And that was so important to me because as a caregiver and as somebody who literally is used to like life and death situations based on how responsible you are, like being responsible is of utmost integrity and importance. So yeah, I would say it was just a couple years ago, and as you've seen, it's been like a steady, beautiful uphill soaring process since, of being able to really see other people soar and other people have their catalyst and breakthrough moments.
It's so beautiful. You almost transformed from the caregiver of others to the caregiver of yourself. And in being the caregiver of yourself, now you get to be the caregiver of others again. And going through that process of being a death doula and a caregiver on a deep sense, I mean, what an intense role, but so important of a role that you've played in that. And now you get to bring this really, like you mentioned, trauma-informed breathwork style in a way that brings ritual into people's life. How important is it for you to bring in that aspect of ritual? Because we've mentioned that word a few times, and I know it's part of your practice to basically bring us back to ourselves, is to really go through that ritual. And you mentioned waking up and laughing in the morning, being like, it's that simple, right? It's that fucking simple. What are we doing? We're listening to, we're scrolling through Instagram on our phones all day. Look, fad, diet. But it's like, oh my gosh, it could be really, really just as simple as breath. So I want to hear about ritual and what that means to you and what that means for your practice.
Yeah. So ritual has always been heavy in my life, thankfully, to my mother. My mother was a very intentional woman. She definitely believed in the beauty way. And she was always just so mindful of the way that she like presented things, or when she sat down with prayer, she was really lovely and just so in tune with the earth and prayer and being in that space of like deepened presence. And really, I think that's what it is deepening presence. It's like deepening awareness and slowing all the way down and being fully present with, say, like the flower petals that you're placing down on the altar, or when you light the candle, being able to be fully there with the flame, I feel like being intentional with our actions in itself is rare in this world of overstimulation and, or like Jagger says, like the mental obesity, like there's just so much. There's so much out there, like the Instagram doom scrolling, it really is just a simple reminder to go within, to really meet yourself within, and we can talk about like all of like the workouts and all of that can get you. But what about working in? What about what's going on in our inner realms, and ritual is a beautiful way to almost transmute that, like through doing something, through creating something, and then being able to be with that something that you created, weaving that with intention and prayer, and being able to culminate that deepened presence, that somatic awareness that we really need, So ritual is definitely a big part of it. Every session that I hold has a communal altar, and everybody is welcome and invited to bring, totems, pictures of loved ones, flowers, whatever that is. And then after every session, we go to the water and we release the flowers to the water with prayer and with anything else that needs to be released. And we're in community and we still hold each other. And it's just a huge part of my life. And thankfully I'm blessed. Now I'm hosting my sessions on the same water that my mother and I walked and would pray to, almost every single night, and now when I came back home, never thought I'd be there. But now I'm on the studio that literally overlooks that same water. So another full circle moment, there as well. But ritual is a massive part of everything that I do. And that goes from waking up every day and having that ritual of taking my first full breath, full inhale and exhale, and saying, thank you. Hello, body. I love you. Thank you. That in itself is ritual, to building the extreme altars and making it communal. And yeah, it's important. I really feel like it's very important.
Today, I want to share with you all the delicious cacao with a K drinking chocolate. Cacao is one of my favorite brands of ceremonial grade cacao and is a delicious addition to my morning routine. Cacao is jam-packed with delicious nutrients that work with my body to stay energized, connected, and focused. What I also love about cacao is that they are a nonprofit on a mission to protect the native heirloom strands of cacao in both Peru and Guatemala by giving back to the farmers and communities that make it available to us. If you are interested in cacao with a K, go to the show notes and you will find a link for 10% off your first order, or simply by using the discount code Jessica, all caps, at checkout. That's JESSICA, all capital letters, at checkout. Yeah. And you mentioned too, like the aspect of mental obesity playing like a big part in our society right now. And I'm so guilty of that. Like before I found breathwork, I was like, had to be intellectually stimulated at all times. I was like, what's the next course I can take? What's the next thing I can do? I need to be the smartest person in the room. Like blah, 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 blah. I was filling myself with all of this knowledge, but I didn't know how to use it. And so finding breath has really been one of those things where I can integrate all of that knowledge and turn it into wisdom. And I think that the important thing about people is like, everyone's trying to turn their intellect into wisdom, but doesn't necessarily have a tool to do it. And breath is a perfect tool for that, because it helps you really look into self and say, oh, wow, okay, that part can be integrated. And so that's been a little like nugget from my perspective on like integrating the ritual into my life. It's like, okay, you just learned a lot. You went through a week of whatever this. Now let's integrate that and let's use breath to really like help you feel it in your body. So that's been a huge part of it. But you also mentioned just the simple ritual of waking up in the morning and taking your first breath in and saying, thanks, body. Like for everyone listening, that's breath work. That's a ritual that you can start literally tomorrow. And you can take that with you in every single moment. And this podcast is called Sacred Healing for a reason, because my hope is that people will take little nuggets from every guest that's on the show and be able to implement something immediately. And so if you're not like able to do a full on, over an hour breathwork session with somebody in your area, just waking up in the morning and having that little practice, that little gratitude practice of taking that first breath in and saying, thanks, body. I see you. I love you. Like just really like feeling that every morning, that will change your life. So I just so appreciate that you honor the ceremonial practices and the ancient practices of being present and creating ritual, and building altars. You are one of the people that I look to for altar building, because your like way of presenting altars is so just magnificent and beautiful. And you can really tell that you put a lot of care, ritual, practice, and just like love into everything that you create. And I think part of that is because you come from this like artistic background. You're a creatrix, you work with metal, but you just have art flowing from your body. And so how did you was that just like an innate thing that you just, hey, I'm just going to create all these beautiful petal sequences and altars and things like that? How did that come to be? Or is that something you learned just from your lineage?
Yeah, I would say it's all of the above. But also, my mother was big on flowers. So even with my jewelry company, she would always dry out any flowers that we found in our garden, and she would tie them up and make little bouquets. And I would put them on all the little orders as they went out. And flowers in themselves just became such a part of our home. There was always a little bit of flowers like around our altars or around the family. And me being me, I would arrange them. And I've just always been doing that. And for as long as I've been alive, I've been creating and fiddling and making things beautiful, and I just don't know if I could even help it. Like, even when I forget the flowers, I'm arranging the candles in a pretty way. I just can't help it. And I think that it comes from that innate, the remembrance of my lineage, really. Look at what we do, in our cultures, but also just that intentional and other way of me. It's like a love transmission, like if you come to me and you are leaning into this space, that's brave. That's so brave. And I think the most beautiful part about this work is actually being able to witness people meet themselves in this way. It makes me well up, obviously, but I think that if people come to you in that sense and lean into you, then it's almost like an honor for me to build those things for the people that come to me. Like, let me adore you in that way. Let me show you my awe of you and your expression in that way. It's really the least I can do, other than being there for somebody. It's just something that really fills my heart, and it feels good to do for the people that come to me. And it's also something that's so deeply appreciated. And it's something that helps keep the prayer alive even after the session, because people take the flowers home and then they have something to really hold on to if they had like a catalyst moment in the session or a breakthrough moment. I have people that will keep those flowers for years, just because that moment meant so much to them. Or we go to the water and release them together. It's just yeah, I really want to, and I see the importance of just those little acts of service and little acts of love that really do create a deeper resonance than we probably think. So
yeah, absolutely. And just like sending that gift out in the world, like spider web.
yeah.
So it's so beautiful. You also sometimes integrate aspects of sound into your breathwork sessions. And I don't mean sound from a perspective of like really lovely music, which I'm sure that you have. And actually, I probably need to hit you up for some playlists. You just share some playlists.
Yeah.
But which I'm sure you have beautiful music, but also just sound as a tool. And it's something I've been playing around with drums and other like vibrational instruments, chimes, things like that. How do you use sound to deepen your own practice and facilitation for breath work?
Yeah. I think sound is so powerful because just like breath, sometimes like when those experiences or things that we feel are beyond words, you can really lean into like breath and sound. And I feel like sound, as we know, with vibrations and frequencies, and that's kind of where I've been, like really studying. I've just learned so much about how it works with the nervous system and really supporting that regulation process. And I play handpan, and then I've been studying gong, and I actually have my chimes like right next to me because that's what I had to do before we hopped on. But I really am enamored by this tool as well, and it just lends itself so well with breath. I found handpan like over a decade ago, and it was while I would play handpan through a little, through my phone for the people that were getting chemo with my mother. And that's when I first noticed all of us would just like, and then suddenly the conversations would shift from like the misery of being poked and prodded and just the sadness of it all. And somebody would say like, wow, that was such a beautiful sound. What was that? And then everybody would be like, yeah, what was that? What's going on? What is this? And then conversations would shift. And so I would just kind of feed that curiosity with sound. And that's when I realized, like, oh, this is a really important tool that works very well with our bodies and with our minds. And, ever since I was a little girl, I've always escaped into music to like ride that wave of emotion and really like follow that inspiration. So sound, I would say, is a beautiful way to integrate, just another modality of regulation, and it goes great with what we do. It's a beautiful way to close out sessions. I've had a lot of live musicians, and I do a lot of live drumming like during sessions, and just being able to lean into that, when you're having that full somatic experience, when somebody comes over you with a drum, it's like, woo, you can really lean into that. You can really lean into it. So yeah, I think sound is incredible.
Yeah, it's interesting when I've like always been around music because my mom's a musician, and almost like wanted to push it away a little bit because I was like, oh, my mom does that like so lame. Like, when you're like a little kid and you like you start to want to be like your parents, and then at some point you're like, I don't want to be anything like them. And so I ended up taking up the drums, and I had a drum set so I could be like as loud as I possibly could in the house, like super annoying and obnoxious. But I ended up playing the drum set, and I was in the band, and got really, really good. And one of the only like girls on the drum team, basically. And I kind of, when I went to college, I stopped doing that. And it was like a huge part of my life. And then I remember coming like full circle back around. My sister ended up getting married, and I played the drums for some of the songs at her wedding, which was like so fun. And it got me kind of like alive again. And that was like probably 12 or so odd years ago, maybe more than that. And so I started like thinking to myself, there's like something to this. Like it's in me that I want to do this. And then again, I kind of fell off. But then when I found breath work, I was like, oh, there's a reason why I know how to play the drums, like, because it's so like inside of me. And when I picked up one of those drums and started drumming during breathwork, I was like, oh, hell yeah. Like, this is it. This is like everything coming together, and the frequency of it and like the deep, deep sounds of the drum feels so good, not only in my body, but like it feels good to give that gift too. So sound has just been such a big part of my life and feels so important, especially with drumming, drumming alone can get you into like a journey in itself. So yeah, it's really cool that you've kind of been able to take some of these skill sets and weave them into the experience of being in a breathwork ceremony.
Yeah. And
Awesome.
also noting like music and sound also ignites that like playful curiosity, like that self curiosity, of there's, for me especially, I'll speak for myself here, like a lot of I don't have a music background or anything. Like my first handpan was my grief tool. It was just something for me to let myself get a little lost in. And I realized just from that, like I kept catching myself trying to do it right or perfect, or we pick up these instruments, there's definitely a sense of awareness that we need to have. And it's great to know how you can affect another person's nervous system when you play these instruments. But I think there's something so beautiful about just playing and getting curious and making a sound just because you can make it. Because just like we encourage people to do that with our voice, or, allowing the expression, Xing the pressure to get rid of the depression, suppression, and oppression, it really does translate when it comes to music and instruments and all of that. And I know that every time I sit down with my gong, or every time I'm really getting lost in my flow with my handpan or my chimes, like that also, first of all, I always catch a big deep breath when I'm in those moments because I want to breathe that in. But I see, that sync happening, when somebody's body is like fully in it, and you really are feeling the drum beat of your own body. Think of after a breath hold when the blood is like pulsing through you and it's like ba-dum, ba-dum. Like to feel that mirrored is beautiful. It's almost like entrainment, and from then we bloom.
Oh, absolutely. Is there a breathwork experience that you've had personally that you'd be willing to share? Something that kind of came to you through breathwork?
Mm, every single one.
I
Isn't
know,
that
right?
beautiful? But I would
Every
say,
single breathwork is different. It's always a different
right,
journey and like never what you think it's gonna be. Like anytime I go in
never.
with an intention, it's like, yeah, nice intention. Cool. We're gonna take you over here. And I'm like,
Yeah,
all
we're like, that was
right.
cute. Let's go here. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, anything you'd be willing to share, even like any visions, experiences, nuggets, and then things you've been able to take into your life.
Yeah, I'm actually going to share about the experience that I had at Fit for Service. Just because that was, as you know, it was like days on end of really intensive inner and outer work, like in all realms. And by the time that we got to that session, I really the whole time I have a little bit of a background with plant medicine, and then I made my way out of the plant medicine space responsibly. And this session brought me straight back to one of those sessions and sittings, and little 4-year-old me hopped out of my body and I was just with 4-year-old me like the whole session at Fit for Service. And it was like this beautiful, strange, wild ride of witnessing this little girl and all of the ways that she had been dimmed or shut down or suppressed or hurt, and a lot of my upbringing came from very difficult circumstances, but also turned my pain into my purpose and also taught me just how much of like walking alchemy we are. And I remember that session being like my full, like, fuck yes, little girl, we're gonna do this, because there was a moment, in that session where we were crying, we were there, I was holding her, I was with this 4-year-old me. And then suddenly 4-year-old me turns around and grabs my hand and she's like, have you had enough? Like, are we done crying? Can we go play? And that was my catalyst moment of play. And I've been really leaning into embodied joy, which is what I'm writing a lot of like research on right now, is really embodying joy as a safe emotion in the body. And allowing that expression, allowing play, allowing that curious self-exploration to come through in many facets. And that was just such a huge session and a huge experience for me. And I remember that night dancing, in that barn. I had never danced like that in my life. And the visuals, like the full-on activation was still there. And just, it was such a beautiful moment of being able to really meet that little me and tell her it's okay. Like it's really okay. And we've struggled a lot. So let's figure out how to play now while we still have the opportunity to do so. Let's figure out how to make that safe for you and for it to be okay. And yeah, it's changed me. It's changed my life. It actually changed the way that I come back home and really hold space too. And allowing other people to meet their inner child and their little me and to hug them and hold them, but also like uplift them and let them smile and be, So yeah, I would say that's one.
Yeah, because the only person we need to impress for the rest of our lives is our 4-year-old self, our 5-year-old self, our little mini me. So that's really beautiful. And that was a while ago. I think it was like almost 2 years ago at this point that we went through that ceremony together, and we were already like ripped wide open. Like it was like, I think that's probably why like people had such deep breathwork experiences too, because we were so ripped open at that point. It was like 4 days straight of like opening activities in general, like physical, mental. We were doing so much. And then to get to that breathwork, it was like everyone just blasted off. It was like a full send.
Full on. And not
Full
only that, but if you remember at the beginning of Fit for Service when we had to do the breath work with the water in our mouth,
Yes.
that
Yes.
was I was still, that was a massive breakthrough moment for my health because that was my biggest fear. And that was also why I almost didn't even show up at Fit for Service, was because I was so nervous about my health. And then I ended up doing that entire obstacle course. I didn't know we had to only just do one. And so I did the
You're like, I'll pick all of them.
And
You picked all of them. You didn't just pick one.
I just thought that's, I don't know. I missed the
You're
part.
Like, that's the way we do it.
Yeah. And so I did everything. And then I crossed the finish line and I'm like catching my breath. I spit out the water and I'm talking to everybody. And it seemed like everybody else had been there for a while. And I'm like, oh, wait, I did everything. But also I had that moment of like, oh, wait, I did everything. Like my body didn't give up on me. I didn't end up like in the hospital like I thought I was going to. I did it. I did it. And that moment to me too was super transformative because I was surrounded by community and surrounded by a couple of people that knew that I was like technically disabled just a few months before that. So for them to like look at me and be like, yeah, you did it. That was another like full send of like, bring it on, baby. And then the rest of those days together, I was like, yes, I can do this. I am able, I've got this. My body's got me. My breath has me. So, I mean, that whole time together was, I feel like breathwork was weaved into a lot of our practices, but
it really was. For those of you who don't already know, my husband and I own a coffee company called Gay Head Coffee. And of course, we drink our own coffee every day, and it's some of the most flavorful and inviting coffee, especially with the nostalgia of coming from a can rather than paper or plastic packaging. But I'm biased, so check it out for yourself. If you're interested, head over to the show notes where you will find a link to order your coffee today from gayheadcoffee.com. That's GAYHEADCOFFEE.com. Thank you all for your support. It means the world to us as a small business. Yeah, it really was. And what you're describing too, just for the listeners, we essentially had to drink basically a mouthful of water and hold it, not swallow it, but hold it in our mouths while we basically ran like an over mile long run plus obstacle course. So there was like active obstacles in the mile plus run where you had to like basically stop and solve puzzles. So there were mental challenges, fight Kyle Kingsbury, physical challenges. What? And there were many different, like there was a balance challenge that we had to do, like walking across and balancing. So there was like so many things that you had to overcome without swallowing the water, which means the entire time everyone was breathing in and out through their nose. So it got me to like a deep place. And I remember at one point, I had just like fought Kyle, been like launched into the woods by like his huge like bag. And I was like just so tiny, just like flying through the air. And I was like, is he coming for me? And then I just like ran away, like scurried away. It was just a ridiculous shit was going on. And I go and I run along this like beautiful, beautiful lake. And I'm walking around, and then all of a sudden it was like dead stop. There was like a line of like 100 people waiting, and I'm like, oh fuck no, we have to hold the water this entire time. And it ended up being like 20 or 30 minutes extra to just like stay and wait for, basically we were given like a gift at the end, which was the gift of Violana Marcus singing to us, and she's just so beautiful. And I remember, because there was such a long line, she ended up just like picking up her singing bowl and she's like going along the line, but she was very intentionally like making eye contact and like singing into the person's soul for like a good amount of time. And I almost like broke. I almost spit my water everywhere, because when she like looked me in the eyes and started like singing, I was having like the biggest somatic release. I was like just like tears, and my body's like shaking, but I couldn't spit the water out, and I was still trying to breathe through my nose. It was just like this weird out of body experience where I was like, what's happening right now? And I can almost like see myself in that line waiting. And then like you, I also did some of the other obstacles, but it was pure choice. I just was like, I want to just know what's going on over here. It really does, like breathwork in a lot of different forms takes you to a magical place. It really does, because the somatic breathwork style is breathing in and out through your mouth, mostly to get that intense kind of more like fiery breath. But the breathwork we were doing was in and out through your nose. And then there's prana breathwork and yogic breathwork and kundalini breathwork. There's all these different modalities of breath. All of them are awesome. So when we talk about breath, we talk about all forms of breath, and breath being basically this vibrational expression out of your body. So it's so beautiful. But yeah, that was definitely a solid experience where we were just kind of ripped open, and then the breath work was just like, okay, here we go.
Yeah, it was awesome. And that Fit for Service landed on my like last like training with Somatic. So it was like the sandwich experience where it was just so embodied that I was like, oh, our breath really is our master key. And look at that, all of the things that, you know, we feel all these things and they're felt senses and sensations, but, you know, and then we hear the words, but to really like marry them both and like have those experiences really shifted things for me. And yeah, I just feel like Fit for Service in general does an incredible job. And I remember that moment with Vailana too. And I was like full on. I remember choking on my water when I was sitting in front of her and then also in front of Caitlin, because I had pulled a card where the whole time I was like envisioning different like animals and things I was trying to embody just to like tell myself like, no, you've got this, you can do this. And then I pulled a card and it was like trust, and it was one of the animals that I kept seeing. So then I just look at her and I'm like trying to not choke on my water, but my tears are coming out of my face.
You're like, I want to tell you what this means. But I can't. I got the card.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you're just trying to, which is like so beautiful in itself too. Like we weren't able to use words in those moments either. Yeah. So every time we were like having a moment with somebody, it was all like, it could not be with words. And so it was like, it was everything but that, which made it even more special. It's
raw.
Just...
And fun fact is I still do that. I still actually run on the treadmill with like water in my mouth, and I still practice that. And I do notice a difference. And I play with a lot of like oxygen optimization videos and stuff too. So it's just so cool. I think that we're really, really blessed to have had that kind of opportunity. I mean, it's how we weaved our paths as well, but my goodness, what those couple of days did for my path were really something.
Wow. I did not know all that. So that is really, really just incredible that you went through your somatic breathwork training and then went right into like a 5-day summit. That's wild to me.
Yeah. And then that was like the weeks after like the online training as well. So yeah, it was a somatic sandwich. It was
a
awesome,
somatic
though.
Sandwich, basically. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier something along the lines of that you had experiences with plant medicine, but you kind of transitioned more into experiencing breath work. What is the reason why you were trying to transition out of those experiences? And I just noticed that little piece, and I wanted to ask about it because breathwork has gotten me to intense places where, and other people have told me, oh, wow, breathwork feels like a medicine journey or a plant journey for me. I haven't experienced a ton of plant medicine. So for me, breath is really all I know. But I was just curious because you mentioned that you were kind of transitioning out of those experiences. And so I was just curious as to your reasons and what your journey was there.
Yeah. So I have a interesting perspective on psychedelics, mostly because, you know, and plant medicine in general, because I remember the moment of like growing up and saying, you know, when you first start hearing about these things in plant medicine, and partner in college who was really into plant medicine at a like very young age, and he was researching all of that. And my curiosity was, of course, piqued, being a curious person, but I literally remember saying, I am so visual. I see and feel and hear so much already, you know, that life already feels very psychedelic. Like, I wonder what would happen. You know, do I even want to cross that road? And I had a beautiful first experience, you know, sitting with medicine, and followed that for a little while. And I see so much beauty in that. However, I also am ended up feeling, like some of it was a little bit too much too fast, and it was almost causing certain like trauma, like the bad trips really could just be, dysregulation and things that we really need to like tap in and sit with. And it got to a point to where I was actually doing a lot of like pre and post integration with breath work in plant medicine communities. And I started truly sitting back and like witnessing people struggling and like going from ceremony to ceremony to ceremony to ceremony, almost like a talk therapy session where you're going from session to session to session to session, and you're in this death loop of like self-help masochism, yet you're not really getting anywhere. It's almost causing more frustration. And one day it just clicked where I was like, wait, we see, feel, hear all these things. We're actually activating a lot of the same things, when we're in breath work or when we're drinking ayahuasca. However, one way is, taking a substance, ingesting a substance, and every substance has an agenda. Or we could just lean into our breath, and our breath is you and you. It's all you. And there was just something so stunning about that, of realizing where even when you're in a bad or a difficult plant medicine experience, what do? They guide you back to your breath. So maybe like just leaning into the breath a little bit more and seeing where your own body can take you first before you start integrating different substances. I find a lot of value in that. And that hasn't done me wrong. It's actually done me really, really right. And although I'm still in plant medicine communities and I offer a lot of supportive work, and integration, I'm utilizing breath work. I'm utilizing somatic modalities. And I just feel like there's so much value in getting to know your body and its capability. Like you and I both know, breath is the first thing that they check for when we come here. It's the last thing we do before we leave, and we're never taught how to utilize it to our body's utmost capacity, to our body's potential. And if you've experienced the power of breath work, you know just how expansive it can be. And once you've been expanded to that, capacity, it's really hard to shrink yourself back down. So I'm just a really big advocate on exploring the self, exploring your inner realms. And then if you want to introduce substances or plant medicines, like that's beautiful. And for some people, that is the way and that is the tool. Just doing that responsibly, and still getting to know your breath. So you have that tool during those experiences, because your breath will never leave you.
Yeah, it's a life force energy, right? And it's one of those things that can be used as a tool, and you can put your foot on the gas or you can put your foot on the brake in breath work. And I find that that's really, really powerful, because when you take a substance, sometimes you can't put the brake on. It's not possible. And in breath work, it is possible to really pull yourself out if you're feeling like you're having a negative experience. So I really like that you're in control, somewhat. You're in control of the experience, and you're able to heal yourself. And knowing how powerful it is to use your body's innate technology, ancient technology, to heal yourself rather than using some sort of an external substance, which again is great if that's the path, but it feels really powerful to use your breath in my experience, because it is something that you carry around with you every single day, every minute of the day. And you can say, wow, I just need to sit down for a moment and do some breath work. And you're able to really walk yourself and guide yourself through it. And that's not something that you can do every single day with plant medicines that are really intense on your body. So
yeah, it's a practice of sovereignty, like at any point you can reclaim your state, like your state of being. And you can't at any point just go like chug some ayahuasca, or you know what I mean? Like it doesn't work like that. However, your breath, absolutely. You can stop for a second and take one big deep breath in and elongate one exhale, and something shifts. So like what a beautiful thing. What a gift that we have, that we carry with us all the time. Get to know it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we kind of close things out, I was curious if you would be willing to and open to guide us in like a couple breaths before we get off the podcast. Yeah, I think it would be really fun.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe just like grounding in together and taking a few breaths. I would love to do that. Thanks for inviting me to do so. All right. So if you'd like to, just getting in a nice, easy seat, a nice, comfortable position wherever you are. And taking a gentle inhale in through the nose. Dropping the shoulders, surrendering to the exhale with a sigh. And doing that again, another deep inhale in. Exhaling with a sigh. And this time, when you inhale in, finding the ceiling of your inhale, so where the breath stops. And then taking another sip, dropping the shoulders and relaxing the jaw on the sigh. And deepening presence, deepening awareness with our body. Following our natural breath, feeling what the inhale is like as it fills up the chest. Letting it travel down into the diaphragm and then down into the belly, thinking about expanding 360 degrees, giving your belly that breath, and then softening into the exhale. And taking a moment just to scan the body, feeling where your breath is at in this present moment, and inviting a little bit more play and curiosity. Where does that breath stop when you inhale? Can you take an extra sip, giving yourself a little bit more, sipping in? And when you exhale, can you soften just a little bit more? Allowing that softening to travel through your fingertips, unfurling. Feeling the seat settle wherever you are, allowing yourself to be supported. And dropping back in, remembering that at any point, you can elongate your exhales. You can make a sound, massage those vocal cords, invite your own instrument, your tool, your voice, allowing it to carry any stress or any pressure you may be holding at this moment. And allowing your inhales to travel to any parts of the body that may be feeling dense or stagnant. Remembering that we can use our breath like a broom, sweeping out the body, clearing the channel, and making room for how we want to feel. Another deep breath in to anchor that in. Taking another sip, dropping the shoulders and sighing it out. Okay. And slowly coming back. Opening the eyes, wiggling the fingers.
Thank you. I feel really relaxed.
I know, it's just a drop, and I'm like, I
Good
want to
night.
stay.
Yeah. But thank you for guiding that. And I just so appreciate your ability to use your voice in a way that feels so calming and so innately intelligent. It's very clear that this is coming from inside. This is coming just like flowing through you. And so want to say thank you for being willing to do that, because we did not talk about that before we got on, but I was like, feeling like we might need to drop in.
Yeah.
So where are you located and where can people find you? Maybe let's drop like social media, website, where you're most active and where people can find your ceremonies and services.
Sure. So currently I am most active in the Central Florida area. So I do a lot of group events right now, bringing the community together. There's been some really stunning things happening out here, of like a really budding community, that's very eager for breathwork and somatics in general. So I'm doing a lot of sessions in Central Florida. However, I do travel and ping pong around the states and currently traveling back and forth to Canada as well. So I'm a little all over the place for this next coming year, but home base is definitely Central Florida. And then as far as connecting online, I would say that Instagram is probably where I'm most active, and that is sakina.seva. So my name is spelled SAKINA.SEVA. And my website is www.entertheinnertemple.com. And yeah. I think my Nightbreed is linked in my Sakina Seva profile if anybody's curious about that. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
I love it. So everyone, please go follow and give Sakina a like and a love and all the things. And like she mentioned, her Nightbreed Creations jewelry is also linked in her Instagram. So you can find all the beautiful jewels on there. And I highly recommend you check it out. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. I will link everything in the show notes for everyone, so they will have access to everything at their fingertips. It was really a joy to connect with you again after such a long time. It's almost been 2 years, and I've been following your journey, and it's just been really, really special. So I appreciate you saying yes and coming on and sharing your magic with the world. And yeah, I can't wait to connect with you again in the future.
Yeah, same. Once again, thank you for you. And it really is just it's so special to connect with people that really are like uplifting and amplifying this message and this work. So just know that I see you too. And I do truly look forward to connecting a lot deeper. And I feel like feeling that intangible something, that thread of excitement in this work and purpose and connecting with like the most human parts of ourselves is just so special. So I do see you, I see your integrity, and I can't wait to see more of you too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And it was so beautiful to connect.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me.